everyone, welcome to my channel, Bookstores and Purrs. My name's Leslie and this is Ginger. Say hi. Alright. Today we're going to be discussing all sorts of books. I am shooting this vlog style. My schedule just keeps getting crazier and crazier. So ideally I like to make short little chats for each book and have a wrap up at the end, but I think this time around I'm just gonna have one long video. Sorry, I have my drink down here and my cat's trying to get to it. Alright, so for the month of August and September I tackled two separate authors, and the first author is Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. It's spelled Ngugi, but I happen to be watching an interview with the author, and he like pronounced his name for the audience, which I appreciated. I have to say a little bit about the author before I go into this. It's in context to the book. This book was published in 1986, I believe. I should know that right off the bat. I just read it. Yes, 1986. At least when I'm saying that, I just realize that's the American first publication. I'm not sure about the original in Gikuyu. Alright, so the author is well known across the continent of Africa. He is an educator. I don't know if he still does, but he did for a while, if not still, teach at a college in Irvine, California. I'm in California, Southern California, so we're in the same area. So that was a nice fun fact to learn about him. And he started writing around the 1960s. And I don't even know how to start this. And this book tackles a conversation about actually English language in Africa and how that proliferates like a imperial colonial mindset. I bring this up because in 1977 the author was arrested and imprisoned, I believe without trial, for an entire year for not just having a play, but having the play told through, I think it's called, I keep doing this, Gikuyu, the Kenyan language that he speaks. It's his first language, but he's also always known English. And so that was such a defining moment for him. Not just the experience of putting together a theater troupe, connecting with the community, but also being in prison. That really solidified his decision that from that moment on, he was no longer going to be writing in English. He was going to be writing in Gikuyu. Sorry, I don't want to say that wrong, so I keep having to refer back to the book. And so that's where this kind of, oh my god, my cat's trying to jump on the camera, where this book dives into. And so that's why I'm kind of giving this convoluted explanation of this book, because this is like nonfiction essay conversation about language and its use in Kenya and broadly on the continent, but also it's so entangled with what happened to him. So yeah, so in the first section the author talks about the language of African literature. So in that chapter what he's tackling is how the dominating language and acceptable and revered language is English. And so let's say he goes to a book festival. He gets very specific, but I'm trying to summarize this for you. He talks about when African literature is mentioned, it's specifically called that, African literature. But what the author posits is that literature written in English by an African author, anywhere in the diaspora, the literature should actually be called African Euro literature, because once the English language is used, it's actually still writing through like an English colonizer lens, and also that changes the audience, right? If the books are written in English, who are the books for? And also when the people of Kenya or Africa, when they're taught how to use this language, it's always going to be through the English Western structure. But I'll get into that later. But that's definitely kind of like the first chapter of what he's tackling. And I want to make sure I don't forget anything else. All right, and then in chapter 2, it's called The Language of African Theater. And so when he goes on to talk about theater, he first addresses the space. And he just says how since Kenya has been colonized, that space no longer exists. It's been capitalized, commodified, and a person, a group, an entity needs to have a license to use space. And what's even worse is the development of the prison system, right? Then that just takes away space and traps people. And he brings it up because I feel like he's trying to say that his anti-colonial act of theater is just that. It's an act of rebellion for him to come together with the community, decide that plays are not going to be in English. They're going to be in Gikuyu and also other languages. So other nationalities within Kenya come together. And that also affects who's being hired for the play, right? It's not being narrowed down to only people that speak English. And also, when people get to speak their own languages outside of English, there's an opportunity to tackle the content differently. What are they going to talk about that's going on within their community? So since this was going on, the government shut it down, banned the theater, and like I said previously, that's when the author became imprisoned. And once again, I'm going to check my notes because I don't want to forget anything. All right. The third chapter is called The Language of African Fiction. And so in that chapter, he does discuss how when he was in prison, he just decided on, he was already thinking about it, but being in prison really solidified his decision to no longer write in English. He's only going to write in Gikuyu, and if publishers would like to have his work in English, they're just going to have to translate it. He's not doing it. And so he's doing that as a way to break away from colonialism and the damage it's done to Kenyan and African roots. And so he goes on to say that what really affected his decision is what was going on in history and current times when this, when he was writing this book, which is that the printing press and the education system for young children up into universities has really been controlled by missionaries and been a catalyst for propaganda and pushing the colonial imperialist narrative. And so now that he wants to tackle writing books moving forward in Gikuyu language, it's just not a switch up of language that he has to consider. He has to now consider, well, if he's no longer writing in English and he's writing in Gikuyu, he has to think about, well, who is his audience now? Who is he writing to? What is he writing about? Because whatever he tackles, it's still within this neo-colonialism existence. For so long, what's been revered is the English way of novel structure as well, which is usually like a singular character, typically white, linear plot, and he wants to break away from that too, and so he has to think about oral traditions. He has to think of Kenyan operas, like all the elements that he was actually using in theater and oratory experiences to be reconnected with his roots and how he tackles writing a book. And so I thought that was fascinating, and I'm gonna go circle back to some of these things. Lastly, the last chapter is called The Quest for Relevance. And the author goes on to talk about how English literature has been used to just reinforce like colonial policy, and brings up again that like African children are experiencing literature with no connection to who they are. It's about learning and ingesting someone else's morals, someone else's history, and they're not really getting a chance to see themselves, to connect with their own identity when having to experience literature and education in that way. And it just kind of circles back to who gets to define what is relevant. And I just thought it was a really powerful work. I absolutely love it. You know, it's really short, and I honestly think that if I had the time, I could have read it within a day. I just didn't have the time. I'll tell you, it's really only 107 pages, so it's very short. It definitely packs a punch, and I highlighted this knot out of this like entire book. I just have so much that I really love and respected about what the author was saying. And I'll quote one sentence because I could really sit here and just read whole sections. But he did write something to the effect of, the physical violence of the battlefield was followed by the psychological violence of the classroom. And he wrote that what was going on in like at that time. So yeah, I just thought that was very powerful to specifically say like psychological violence. I thought that was an apt phrase, and I love his work. Going back to what the author said about trying to tackle how he was going to write a story, I appreciated reading that because the first book that I ever read by this author is actually Devil on the Cross. I still have all my little bookmarks on here. And I wanted to bring this up because I don't want to go too much in. I'm not even going to give you a summary. I'll just say this. What stuck out for me was how the author was talking about how he was going to tackle narrative, and that reminded me of Devil on the Cross because it's not quite linear, and in fact the way that he tackles character in here is in a way that I've never seen a character tackled before. there's a character, and I don't know if I'm saying the name wrong. I'm sorry, I didn't check before this. I should have. That's named Waringa. And that character, for me, if I remember correctly, he tells us about this character, but I almost feel like it's not a character on solid ground, and that's not a ding against the author. I actually thought what he did was really creative. He tells you about a woman, and then he says something to the effect of, she could be married, she could not be married, she could have a child, she could not have a child. It's actually not about that. And he's bringing that all up because later on, all the different issues that the character comes up against just for being a woman. And I felt like that was him saying really early on, all these elements don't matter. And he's bringing it up because when, for example, let's say women are harassed, there's all these excuses society will make about why that harassment happened to that woman, and actually like re-victimize the woman. At least that's what I was thinking about when I read it. I felt like he was preemptively addressing those issues, and that just like really blew me away. Or at least that's what I remember about it. It's been a while since I've read it, but I do just remember that I really, really enjoyed it. And actually, there's a scene in this book that he discusses in Decolonising the Mind that reminded me of the book The Animal Farm, in case you're interested, and that helps you or makes you feel like a bit more enticed to reading Devil on the Cross. This is definitely a book that the author is also revered for, so I highly recommend that. And something else I wanted to bring up is that I have not read The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, but the author in prison, or I should say in this book, while he's in prison, mentions in this book, and he says that he was thinking about his students and if they had even read The Wretched of the Earth. So it's a very important book to the author, and I happen to have this on my shelf. I got this maybe like a couple months ago, not too long ago, on a whim. I don't know anything about this person or this book really. I just went to Barnes & Noble and picked it up because it sounded interesting. And so now I really want to read this. But my schedule's so crazy, I don't know how I'm going to make that happen. But I really want to read this soon rather than later. And all because the author mentioned this book. So I'm going to put this aside, and I'll just say that's basically the review for my book, which is honestly, I really enjoyed this book. It's a powerhouse, and I feel like I'm not even really analyzing. I'm just like summarizing it for you because it's just so good. There's not an ounce of fat on this particular nonfiction work. So I don't even know what to say. I almost feel like saying Devil on the Cross is a great work of fiction to start with him, and if not, then as far as nonfiction, go with this. Go with Decolonising the Mind. I really, really enjoy this. I could talk so much more about what happened in this book, but I mean, I would just end up reading the whole thing to you because I enjoyed it so much. So, secondly, I'm going to be reading A Grain of Wheat next, and in case you didn't watch my TBR video for this season, I will read the back to you. The back says, set in the wake of the Mau Mau Rebellion and on the cusp of Kenya's independence from Britain, A Grain of Wheat follows a group of villagers whose lives have been transformed by the 1952 through 1960 emergency. At the center of it all is a reticent Mugo, the village's chosen hero, and a man haunted by a terrible secret. As we learn of the villagers' tangled histories in a narrative interwoven with myth and peppered with allusions to real-life leaders, including Jomo Kenyatta. A masterly story unfolds in which compromises are forced, friendships are betrayed, and loves are tested. So I don't know what else to say other than once again, you're gonna get tired of another video of me just saying that I love what I've read. But yeah, I kind of feel like this is one of those authors where I can't go wrong, you know. And I've said this every once in a while when I bring up this author. I do want to read all his work, but he's put out a lot, and at some point I just want to focus on his nonfiction work because he's put out so much. And he also even wrote a book, something to the effect of a guide for writing in prison. Something like, the title is something like that, and it really is about his time in prison writing. And I think I'm really going to enjoy it. And with that said, I want to share one more quote and then I'll stop. So the quote that I really felt stuck out to me, that really reflects his ambition, rebellious nature, and just like the fact that he will not let the government's repression, society's repression, get him down or stop him, is he says on page 64, "Cell 16 will become for me what Virginia Woolf had called a room of one's own, and which she claimed was absolutely necessary for a writer. Mine was provided free by the Kenya government." And so that just describes his determination, you know. Anyways, alright, so wish me luck. I'm going to try to blast through the next book. I wish I had more time to go at a slower pace, but I am really just determined to tackle the 3 books that I have on my shelf by this author. Hey everyone! Alright, so I just finished A Grain of Wheat by Thiong'o. I'm trying to gather all my thoughts about this. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read you the back and I'll kind of jump off from there. Alright, so this is what it says on the back. The best known novel by the great Kenyan writer. Set in the wake of the Mau Mau Rebellion and on the cusp of Kenya's independence from Britain, A Grain of Wheat follows a group of villagers whose lives have been transformed by the 1952-1960 emergency. At the center of it all is a reticent Mugo, the village's chosen hero and a man haunted by a terrible secret. As we learn of the villagers' tangled histories and a narrative interwoven with myth and peppered with allusions to real-life leaders, including Jomo Kenyatta, a masterly story unfolds in which compromises are forced, friendships are betrayed, and loves are tested. That summarizes the book up so well. I'm not sure how much more I could add to this. This is historical fiction, and like the book says, grabs on too much, so much onto like what happened in real life. And I don't know if it's possible, but I'm gonna look into some documentaries maybe about this timeline, or maybe in the future I would like to read more nonfiction work about this particular rebellion. And so when I read this timeline that's post Mau Mau Rebellion, we really lock into the characters, what they're considered present time, and how they reflect on how colonialism, imperialism has affected them. How have they rebelled against it for the sake of Kenya's independence, but how have they been marred by it, affected by it? Did they have exchanges in their life where they were actually like, for lack of a better word, potentially enabling it, but just it's so permeated around them and enforced on them. So the characters are very haunted as they reflect on the past and how they were affected by colonialism. And some of the characters even have to come to terms with they spent so much time fighting against something that they were put into certain roles that if this British imperialism wasn't forced on them, they wouldn't be in. So then they have to really examine, well, who are they now that this is going away, that the British Empire is leaving, and what's the new dynamic? Who are they now? What does their leadership role look like? What does this mean? So it's just clearly a good thing, but it's still it really speaks to how much this affected people, even like their own identities in a way. I mean, we see how characters are so affected also by shame. And something that stuck out to me that I'm just going to kind of say a comment, but I don't want to say too much because I want you to really just be able to experience the book. But there's a female character, one of the characters' wives, and I think through her character you really see how women are placed in these Madonna type roles, even in a different culture than the ones I have read or experienced in other books, where there is that same issue, that dynamic in cultures where it's like a woman is either a Madonna or a whore and there's like no in between. And so I really think that speaks to like how women's humanity gets stripped away in this male-female society. And it's like really worth examining in the book. I can't speak too much to let's say something that the book on the back touches upon, but I just don't know enough about when it speaks to myths. But I did notice like there are some, I guess you could say, allusions to like Christian symbolism. For instance, when these characters refer to a train, they call it a white snake, and so that made me think of the Christian biblical Satan, I guess, right, from Adam and Eve. That's just what kind of stuck out to me, that something that's we think is supposed to be like for the betterment and progress is actually really hurting a society. Yeah, so it's another way to look at like industrialization and who is this really helping and who is it hurting. And so lastly, even though like on the back the summary of the book is just talking about how Ngũgĩ has a secret, I'd have to say he's not the only one that's really affected by actions that he's made. And also there are some British figures that the author writes through them at times, and that really narrows down just the horrific actions and violence against the Kenyan people that happened. So yeah, I enjoy this book. I'd say I still enjoy Devil on the Cross more so than this book. There's something about this heightened, not quite surreal element in Devil at the Cross that really was powerful. This is too, it's just in a different way. It's more of a slow burn. if that makes any sense. There's almost this mystery-like quality to it as you're experiencing each character. And I'm going to go ahead and read from page 14. Oh yeah, because I didn't want to forget to mention how this also speaks to how the missionaries really had a corrupt system that also just reinforced damage to the Kenyan people and further progressed British rule, I guess. And so one of the characters says, "We went to their church. Mumbia in white robes opened the Bible. He said, 'Let us kneel down to pray.' We knelt down. Mumbia said, 'Let us shut our eyes.' We did. You know, his remained open so that he could read the word. When we opened our eyes, our land was gone, and the sword of flames stood on guard. As for Mubia, he went on reading the word, beseeching us to lay our treasures in heaven, where no moth would corrupt them, but he laid his on earth, our earth." So that really was like an impactful, like less than a paragraph, creating the kind of imagery of what was stolen and stripped from Kenyans. And that's really just a testament to the author's writing. Okay, so next I'm going to be reading The River Between. And I'm not sure which timeline this is. I know I looked at this before, but I'm pretty sure it's around the same timeline, and also, yeah, in Kenya, because it has to do with the Gikuyu people. And so, yeah, that'll be my next section. If you can see my cats. I have one cat behind the camera and one down here trying to get my attention. Alright, before they start attacking the camera. Hey everyone, I completely interrupted my scheduled reading for September because I picked up Leslie Jones's audiobook. She put out a memoir. She's a comedian and actress. And I absolutely enjoyed her memoir. Apparently the Audible version of her memoir and the book are different because Leslie Jones just went on so many tangents in the book, and at times was more revealing about her life. She states this in the memoir because she kept going off on tangents. So what I have to say about the delivery is it's Leslie Jones reading her own memoir, and I cannot recommend this so like any more than I feel like I'm bursting because it was just so good. It was so much fun. The way that she reads doesn't even feel like she's reading. It just feels like she's having a conversation with a friend. It's very casual and meandering, and so her storytelling isn't exactly linear because of this. She does start out in childhood into adulthood, but once again she kind of goes off on these tangents. And so the book starts out when she's very young. At some point she lives in Tennessee. That's not really where it started at, but she just talks about how she was raised by a military man, her dad, Willie Jones, and her mother, but her father just seems like such a large figure that really affected her life. And also I've seen a photo of him before and they look a lot alike. Her dad has very strong features, and what she talks about is not just her life starting out, but she just sprinkle in early on her parents, I want to say grandparents' experiences having to deal with segregation and racism and all that, just the brutality that they really had to face. And that really sets a tone for then, like, the perspective that she ends up taking in, right? And also her own experiences with racism. Also, this book very much focuses on the family dynamics. Her mom falls, I can't remember if she fell ill or got injured. I'm already forgetting. I've been reading so much, I'm getting like all over the place. So that puts the family like in a state of mourning, and how that affects their dynamic. On top of that, later on, her dad relocates them to California to pursue his own dreams, and then that in turn affects the family. And, you know, sets her brother down a dark path that eventually leads to his demise. I don't want to give away too much from the book, but then she goes on to talk about her struggles of just becoming independent. She always had to be the one to be independent. That's something that her dad really pressed upon her. It just seems like he was really hard on her, and even though that was really tough on her, she also has so much gratitude for those moments. And I feel like that's what's really the overall message, is her optimism and gratitude. And that just seems like it's so hard at times, because I'm reading and hearing everything that she's going through, and I almost feel like this chip on my shoulder for her and everything that she's gone through, whether it was on the comedy circuit or on Saturday Night Live. It just seems like every step of the way in her life, she had to really like stand up for herself and truly believe in herself, when others constantly like underestimate her. And that was like a big takeaway for me. And I don't want to forget something. Since I listened to this on audio, I wrote it down. This is a bit of a paraphrase of something she said towards the end of her book. And she just talks about, I guess, an overall philosophy for life. She said, "Discovering who you are is the goal. I know myself. I'm not a dinosaur. I'm going to keep growing. Leaves turn brown, wither and go away because other leaves are coming." And so I felt like that also spoke to the fact that she's willing to like change for the sake of progression and not let herself get hindered, which really speaks also like not to others' philosophy, but also an industry that tries to like pigeonhole her. And she's definitely just had some rough experiences, even on sets, whether it's a commercial or if it's a movie. But also you really get to experience all like her really great friendships that she developed over time. And speaking of gratitude, she does have this moment in the book that I felt like and anyone could relate to. She was in between places. She was looking for an apartment, and this really nice gentleman, like she knocked on the door, didn't schedule an appointment to look at an apartment, a space that he had around back. She goes in the space, and I think at that moment she just had so much feelings and emotions, so much she was going through, that it just came bursting out, and she started crying. And she's even laughing as she says this, because she probably looks back and is like, wow, that was such a moment. But she's burst crying, and she tells this gentleman about how her situation, and she's like, "I'm good for the money, I'll pay you every month." It's coming from a very like desperate, sad place, but I feel like everyone in life, when you have a struggle, you could relate to that moment where sometimes you want to conduct yourself in a certain way, but everything is just coming at you, and so it comes out in whatever way it's going to come out, and you don't really have control over it. So that's a moment that really like stuck out to me. But I absolutely loved it. So if you enjoy memoirs or if you're a fan of Leslie Jones, I'd say listen to the audiobook. It was so good. I used the Libby app, or actually I should say I checked the Libby app, but there was such a long hold and I just greedily wanted to read it right away. So I ended up using Audible, and it was completely worth it. I don't know what else to say. At some point I do want to read the book because I want to see how different it is and maybe how less revealing it is than the Audible. But yeah, so yeah, in between everything that I'm reading, I carved out time just to listen to that. So I highly recommend. There's something about, even when she talks about like tough times, I don't know, she just has such a joyful spirit and it just comes through. Anyway, so I'll leave that here and I will just continue on reading. Hey everyone, what do you know what? I decided to sneak in another book. So I read Why Willie Mae Thornton Matters by Lynnée Denise. This is a biography, but it's told in a series of essays about Willie Mae Thornton. Back in her time, she was known as Big Mama Thornton. To talk about this book about Willie Mae Thornton, I have to talk a little bit about before this book was created. The author is, oh my gosh, I have to refer to my notes because I'm going to mess it up. The author is a DJ, an artist, a doctoral student, and she's been an admirer of Willie Mae Thornton because she has such a musical, the author has such a musical background. And she knows that there is one other biography, or the only biography that has been written before this was written was by a white German author. And so the author was just curious as why is there no other biography? Why is the only other biography written by someone that's essentially not an American, but also white? And so that depending on who the writer is, right, they're also infusing their lens whether they want to or not. And I can't even think about the other author's name, but I will make sure to include it below. And so Lynnée Denise even has conversed and met with this other author. They're lovely. They were willing to also share their research. And these are things that they also discussed. And ultimately, the other author wrote about Willie Mae Thornton because they love writing. They love writing biographies, especially people that have not been written about before. And that's definitely someone that Willie Mae Thornton is. No one's written about her. And so Lynnée Denise set out to write a biography, but through their lens, because they're a Black queer woman that's also a DJ that has the studious like background as well. And so she wants to write a book, but through her lens, and also wants to focus in on the aspects of Willie Mae Thornton that were queer. And so then the author goes on to express why they define Willie Mae Thornton in the way that they do. And so there's kind of like this meta conversation, right? She's talking about Willie Mae Thornton, but then she's also talking about why she wrote about her and what she feels needs to be also explored. I have a very like surface level knowledge of Willie Mae Thornton, so I really enjoyed this. And also there's this talk about the people that Willie Mae Thornton rubbed elbows with, right? She also came up with all these other legends. And we also learn about I just realized I'm saying this, but I don't want to give away everything in the book. But just like how young she was when she had to give up her first child, how there's not a lot of that we could really like hypothesize about that part of her life, because there's just so many people have also like passed away from that time. And so that's also why the other authors' knowledge is so important, because the gentleman that wrote the first ever biography about Willie Mae Thornton also talked to a lot of people when they were still alive. And so that's an interesting conversation. So although I read this book, I also want to read the other book and kind of like compare and contrast these two works. So that would be a really good experience to have. Something that this also tackles, but is not in the main focus, and I appreciate that, is one of the songs that Willie Mae Thornton is well known for is, what do you call it, Hound Dog, that one that Elvis Presley became like well known for. And this leads into a discussion about equity, the origins of that song, Willie Mae Thornton's contributions, and how she financially got stiffed compared to the money that Elvis Presley made later on. And that really speaks to how there's a whole system and industry that is there to support and uplift artists if they're white, but if they're not, there's all these reasons suddenly not to pay them. And even the people around Willie Mae Thornton that on a rare occasion may have had her best interests at heart, they really didn't. She had a lot of people that just time and time again took advantage of her as an artist. She struggled her whole life as an artist to make a living, and ultimately she loved what she did, so she was going to keep doing that. But it's just really disheartening to see that how there's like a person that's once again an example of like being taken advantage of. So yeah, I really love reading this. And you know what? I am going to share a quote for this one. And I think it's on page 66. And it really speaks to an industry that took advantage of Willie Mae Thornton. It's on page 66. So I'm trying to push over. And it's like the last page of that particular chapter. And the chapter I'm reading from is White Boy Magic and the Making of Genre. And at the end, the author writes, "The more I've looked into history of the labels, the more enraged I've become about the exploitive slavery conditions that enshrine the publishing industry. Aside from publishing credit is a question of music business literacy, and discussions of literacy for Black people are bound up with the legacy of slavery too. Early blues and R&B artists belong to a community of people who were punished or killed for learning how to read. Let's be clear, the cheating, the payment in alcohol, and the hidden and fine print fees that artists found themselves responsible for are all extensions of sharecropping capitalism, another invention of white boy magic." And I just found that to really encapsulate what this book also tackles. And I just found, yeah, that was just very impactful. I don't even really have the words for that, but this is definitely worth a read. And there's also other books. I guess this is like an ongoing series where different authors will tackle someone in the I guess music arts. And so I mean, there's one about Mariah Carey, Sinead O'Connor. I want to read the one about La SIDESHOW. That sounds really good. And there's also one about the Ramones. So yeah, I'd recommend this. And also, where did I picked it up from OCTAVIA'S bookshelf. And so I'm glad that they had a copy, and this is actually signed, so I rarely have a signed book, so this is something worth keeping. let me see. I have one more book to read that I completely interrupted by picking this up. So my pile just keeps getting bigger, and I did that to myself. All right, everyone, just wish me luck on this reading journey. Hey everyone, I just finished The River Between. I didn't outline this today, so it's going to be a little bit of an agent of chaos, and on top of that, my cat Toriel is acting crazy, so the camera might get shaky. Okay. Where do I start? So this book takes place in Kenya and is like on the kind of like at the beginning of colonization in Kenya. Missionaries have come in, and some people have adopted Christianity. And this focuses on the Gikuyu people. There's a river, and it's called the Hanya River. And on each side, you see? Are you gonna say hi? She's gonna get upset. Chill. Good. There's a Hanya River, and on each side are these two tribes. One is known as the Makuyu, and the other one is Kameno. And so on one side are the tribe that have adopted Christianity, and the other side a tribe that's trying to hold on to their roots and rejecting Christianity and just trying to not let their culture get corrupted. So this story really does describe like holding on to culture, dismantling colonialism, and it has a star-crossed lovers kind of meshed in all that. It starts off with Chege. Chege is an elder, and he had a vision of these white settlers coming in. He didn't know that's who it was going to be, but that's what he foretold, and everyone just didn't listen to him, didn't believe him. And then what happened is missionaries came in and started to colonize, and so that's like a bit of an indication of what's going on when you don't listen to your elders or to other people in the community. And so he gives birth to his son. He has Wayaki, and he tells Wayaki that basically he sees him in a vision like as a leader, as the one that's going to hold on to their traditions and just save them from this intrusion by these settlers. So this is not just like his vision, but I think it's almost posed as maybe it's not just a vision, but like a fable in a way. So I found that interesting, because also when you have that kind of element in it, it can be dangerous, right? About who believes that. Like, you know, if someone believed that they were like some sort of savior, what are they willing to do with that, to make that happen, for that knowledge, when they also put all that responsibility on themselves as well. And so you have the head of household, Chege, and then you have Joshua, who is essentially like the leader with the tribe that now believes in Christianity. So he has really like forsaken any traditions that has to do with his culture in his childhood. He is completely treating like the ways of his tribe are like a sin in a way. And so that's why he now has the name Joshua. He's now taken a Christian name. And so he's very like protective over his family, his wife, and his two daughters. And so what happens is you have these figures that are just so like, I guess, holding so strongly to their beliefs. And so then you kind of learn also like what they're willing to do, like to hold on to their beliefs as well. There's also a discussion about something that happens in Kenya. I don't know if it just happens anymore or if this is just because this is a period piece, but there's male and female circumcision that's part of a, what do you call it, like a coming of age ceremony. And so the tribe wants to continue this practice. The Christian followers don't want to. Once again, they see this as like a form of sin. But it's interesting because the tribe that is not Christian and is trying to hold on to like their cultural beliefs, it almost seems like they didn't use the word sin, but it seems like they find it to be like a sin if you don't move forward into womanhood or manhood without performing this ritual. And I found that like really fascinating, like on both sides, how like someone's practice can really inform how strongly they believe about something. And so you have these like two head of households, two leaders, and what they believe, what they're passing down. And so then there's like the second generation, their children that are coming of age, coming into adulthood, and how they handle that. So for Chege, his son partakes in like the ceremony, but also Joshua has his two girls that are coming into womanhood, and how do they perceive their Christian beliefs? How do they perceive their tribal customs? Because they very much like obey their dad, but they also have their own thoughts and feelings about having a belief and also holding on to tribal customs. And so he has one daughter that is considering participating in the ritual of circumcision. And then you have another daughter that won't even let herself fall in love with someone because they're from like the opposing tribe. And so you kind of see how there are these belief systems, but how are they kind of like keeping people in a box in a way? And also, can there be more nuance and duality to someone's beliefs? Why is it that one of his kids is told she can't, like, I guess the way she sees it is she wants to participate in this ceremony, but that doesn't mean that she's rejecting like her Christian beliefs. And why can't she hold on to both of those? Why can't there be made space for both? Why does she just have to outright reject her other parts of her culture, basically, in order to fit in to like a Christian ideal? And something else that stuck out for me is in the book, like Joshua thinks about some of the things that is in the Bible. For instance, like having like someone having multiple wives, being polyamorous, and in the Bible it's okay, but it seems like he just refers to the white settlers. So it's not good enough if it's like the Christian God's word. He still refers back to like a white person to determine like what are the scope and boundaries of the religion. And I thought that was really interesting that actually it was the white settlers that trump whatever is in the Bible in a way. So in other words, I guess they're all about monogamy. So having multiple wives isn't something that his tribe can partake in. But that really stuck out for me. It's like, well, technically, if the Bible is supposed to be God's word, wouldn't that be enough? Why wouldn't that be okay? Why does he think the white settlers have more like intel or like knowledge. I don't know. I just like had me going round and round in my head, and I really appreciated that the author wrote that, because that really stuck out to me. Something else that I enjoyed is some of the like symbolic techniques the author used. For instance, like on chapter 7, he describes Joshua's home. So it says, Joshua's house was different. His was a tin-roofed rectangular building standing quite distinctly by itself on the ridge. The tin roof was already decaying and let in rain freely. So on top of the roof could be seen little scraps of sacking that covered the very bad parts. The building, standing so distinctly and defiantly, was perhaps an indication that the old isolation of Makuyu from the rest of the world was being broken down. And in the book, you see like Joshua's house deteriorate and other people's houses deteriorate over the course of the novel, and I thought that was really symbolic of what everyone's going through. And I felt like what he's saying is everyone's like these two tribes, their culture is being deteriorated by colonialism. And by the end of this book, when I was reading it, I felt like it really hit on how like this religion comes in. And I feel like it's like a proxy for like colonialism, right? I mean, it's also a part of it, but I feel like the more I read how intimately these tribes like are pitted against each other and are working to almost like in a way like overthrow the other one, I almost feel like, oh, well, this is like what colonialism is meant to do. It's meant to come in and divide and conquer in a way, but it's almost like if you're getting in your car and you put it on neutral and you just let the car drive because you're like, all right, I already did my part. I already turned on the ignition. I already taking off. I just need it to do the rest. And that's what I feel like is going on here, is that once this division takes place, the white settlers don't need to do much. They could just let other people within their own community tear themselves down. And I definitely think that that happens in other places where colonialism has really had a stronghold in their communities. And I really appreciated the way that the author really like constructed that to make that apparent to the reader. So yeah, in short, I just felt like the whole book is about when these kind of divisions take place, what is it going to take? What are the tools? What are the skills to recover and have some form of unity come back together? And also, who's going to back you? Is your community going to back you? Are they not going to back you? And once again, I go back to one of Chege's daughters who really was willing to take on like a nuanced duality to existing. And I feel like, I don't know, that really just stuck out to me in the book. Why would that enrage people when she's just trying to like not lose parts of herself? Yeah, so I just found this to be like a really fascinating read. And once again, he has a work that really focuses on a particular community in Kenya and how colonialism has come in and made attempts at like chipping away at their culture and their community. And so yeah, I think out of all the books, I don't know, I think I just read this, so I'm really loving it. And it was actually just such a quick and easy read, actually. It flowed well. It was straightforward. I would say it's kind of medium to slow pace, but I found that I zipped through it because I just feel like the author just has so much to say with every single book that I find myself very much engaging with the material. So yeah, I think that's the last book I'm gonna read for this particular time. I kind of took on too much, and so hopefully in another week after I put this out. Oh no, maybe that's not true. I was gonna put out a wrap up, but I think I might wait to do some more research. Anyways, if you're watching this, thank you. This has turned out kind of long. I hope you're doing well. Like, subscribe, comment below. Let me know if you've read anything by Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. I tried to Google to see if there was any other work that had been adapted to a movie. I didn't see anything. I think that's also one more thing that I wanted to say is that I feel like a book like this could easily be adapted, and I wish his work was. But yeah. Alright, I love you all, and I'll talk to you later.